Our next speaker is Fieldsend Danks, who's Associate Professor and Academic Dean at Plymouth College of Art.
Okay, I might have to keep this brief. I'm not feeling very well, so if I suddenly disappear back to my seat, then forgive me, and I think we can produce the proceedings after the event, hopefully. So if I suddenly feel that I can't cope, I'll be sitting back down. But anyway, I'm here. So my name is Paul. I'm, as introduced, Associate Professor and Academic Dean at Plymouth College of Art. I've been involved in drawing for years and years and years, and especially around the student voice, and I've got some students of mine here in the audience, so hello. So really I'm going to show you some images that are a mixture of children's drawings, some adults' drawings, some artists. I'm going to range it up a little bit perhaps. Again, I probably will keep this quite brief, but I suppose one of my thoughts really is around the complexity of drawing and the relationship with learning and where that kind of begins. And I guess as today is really about weaving together some kind of narrative to do with learning and drawing, perhaps that's the tack I'll take. Here you can see a drawing by Beatrice. I think she is aged 5 on the screen there. Quite interesting drawing. If you can't read at the back, that's her opening her birthday presents. It's kind of interesting. What I want to start with really is a quote by Richard Serra, which is that there is no way to make a drawing, there is only drawing. And I guess I've used that statement a lot in my teaching career because I think it's really prescient. And I'm going to read a little bit to you, which hopefully will make some sense as I go through. So the relationship between drawing and learning is complex and extraordinarily rich, beginning for so many of us in the first few years of life as we grapple with translating what we see and experience through some form of graphic means. It's perhaps hard for many of us who've been champions for drawing within an art school to comprehend a world that isn't interrogated through the mark, scribble, diagram, or transfer of gesture to surface. It's kind of inconceivable. But if we press pause for a while, what role does drawing actually play in the construction of knowledge within an educational or learning context? What's it for? With the massification of higher education and the current challenges posed to learning in mainstream schooling, drawing as a prerequisite asset for knowledge appears on the face of it to be vulnerable. Richard Serra's statement, "There is no way to make a drawing, there is only drawing," gives us a helpful form of words to reimagine the potential in drawing as a form of self-determined learning. But it also suggests that the act of drawing is fundamental to the human condition and is iterative by default. The symbiotic relationship between drawing and learning surely provides a mutually beneficial condition for us as worldly beings to express our thoughts. Go back a little bit. In the context of an increasingly target-driven education system, probably my primary motivation for today in some ways, the rise of new mainstream qualifications and control measures for secondary education, such as EBAC and Progress 8, introduced in the United Kingdom in 2010 and 2016 respectively, have steered a sharp course away from creative subjects, favouring measurable learning and raising the spectre of teaching to the test. According to Biesta, in educational systems that reduce children to test scores, that stifle creativity or only allow creativity if it generates the right outcomes, the arts definitely have an important role to play. So this is a drawing of Mum, apparently, allegedly, and if you look very carefully, you can make out 2 arms, and I'm sure everybody agrees everybody's mum looks like that when you're age 6 or 7. So I think that's correct. So today, as I say, I think I'm going to mix up some of the slides unashamedly between artists and children. As the creative industries continue to grow globally, we're at the same time witnessing the strangulation, however, of its pipeline. We face an increasing need to reassert the role and practice of drawing as an insubordinate and radical proposition in learning, capable of unlocking new ideas, thoughts and experiences in and of the world. Just what are the dangers of bypassing a generation for whom the act of drawing ceases to be a regular occurrence beyond their early years education? and what priorities should we instill in future education policies? The newly theorised space of drawing that has gained critical momentum in the last 10 years or so within higher education has also prompted many working in creative education to reimagine the relationship between the seemingly inseparable strands of drawing and learning. This special relationship is given credence by Orr and Shreve in their excellent book Art and Design Pedagogy in Higher Education, in which they assert that knowledge that is tacit, explicit and experiential, including the known, the unknown and the search for the not yet known, is sticky knowledge. I'm minded here to recall Edison's Eureka moment. This bulb-like head on the left, perhaps more reminiscent of a primitive form, or Picasso perhaps, is in fact the carrier of energy, energy sufficient to light up the world. This analogous resonance to drawing is a speculative strategy, capable of unveiling and adhering to knowledge in its slipstream, is further supported by the importance placed by Orr and Shreve on ambiguity, something that's been mentioned already this morning, and uncertainty as fundamental components in art and design in higher education. Perhaps it's in this uncertainty that we find drawing's essential character, that it provides solutions to the intangible, that it leaves open questions for us to complete, and thereby makes us complicit in its comprehension of the world. Perhaps this is why we all draw. So this is a kind of interesting image here. I hope you can see it at the back. If you can't, I'll try and describe it to you. This is, again, by Beatrice. I think you saw an image before. It's called Nativity. You won't be surprised to learn. And it involves quite a few Playmobil figures that were arranged up a staircase. And if you can imagine that staircase, one of those where it has a runner up the middle and then a bit of bare staircase at the side. These figures started at step 1 and they went all the way up in the process of getting towards Christmas. Every day, a new little scene arrived on the step with these figures eventually heading up towards the top. And as they got to the very sort of top, it emerged that this was some kind of giant nativity scene. And when Beatrice got to the very last step, she ran out of steps and hadn't quite finished her mini project. So, what does she do? Well, you can see the character in the middle of the left-hand screen. There's one of the 3 wise kings. There's his torch. And then there was a bit of drawing. And that torch was illuminated through a piece of drawing in which the manger appears. So the destination was solved through an act of drawing. And I suddenly looked at that and thought, as a proposition, that is unbelievable for a child to vision space in that way. So there was a solution through drawing to a practical problem. And it wasn't through any guidance or steer. This was just it. That circle of yellow light is the torch. And in that beam of light, there is the nativity. Wowza, that's amazing. And if you look very carefully, though, what transpired in the nativity on the right-hand side, it looks like Jesus is having some kind of cardiac operation. There we go. So, as I say, I'm going to kind of keep ploughing on until I lose my voice entirely. So drawing's ability to outmove the absolute, maybe, is characterised by Marshall and Sorden towards hyperdrawing through ambiguity, a really interesting book, in which its elusiveness supports a weaving through semi-permeable, perforated disciplinary boundaries. Well, you've just seen that articulated by a 7-year-old. If we really want to break down barriers to learning and teach between, across and through subjects, it seems clear that drawing remains a fundamental asset. Go back a bit, sorry. So the introduction of new technologies for creative learning has of course afforded new spaces of thinking and practices to emerge. In the context of practice-based learning, anything goes perhaps. Far from creating a polarity of practice situated in analog and digital silos, new technology perhaps has provided an exciting bridge between the virtual and the real, a little bit like that slide prior, offering by consequence simulated haptic experiences of material investigation. But drawing in its broadest sense has become increasingly marginalised outside of the orthodoxies of an industrialised and industry-focused education system. Where drawing practices thrive in schools, colleges and universities, it's often in spite of localised approaches and government initiatives, rather than through any lack of desire on the part of participants and their teachers. That drawing is a universal form of transgenerational learning is surely still beyond measure. I hope you would agree. So, in considering a context for drawing and learning, it's helpful perhaps to think about the particular conditions that contribute to and facilitate this special relationship. Within education, and more specifically within schools of art and architecture, these conditions adopt variable guises, but are most commonly found in analytical and observational constructs such as technical drawing, diagrammatic representation, or studies from life perhaps. But they're also manifest in the multiplicity of other approaches, such as drawing in situ, and again that was mentioned this morning already, where drawing is frequently employed to convey the intangibility of lived experience. If you can't read the text there, that's somebody with a lot of pencils strapped to their body, writhing around a room of paper. There you go. Things you do, eh? If you can't read the text at the back, I'll read it to you. It says, Ra travelling through the land of the dead in a boat. That's by a 7-year-old. So if we pause here for a minute to think about the act of drawing in situ, something I value very, very much in terms of my work with students, we can immediately understand the possibilities afforded by drawing for learning through time and space, through what you might call a provisional act of mimicry. As such, drawing provides us with a unique form of speculative encounter that has the ability to expand our relational understanding of the world around us. This is quite literally metaphysical drawing at work. According to Professor Anita Taylor, I don't think Anita's here this morning, there are distinct ways in which drawing functions as it distinguishes and aids our understanding of a complex world. Through signs and symbols, by mapping and labelling our experience, it also provides us enough to discover through seeing, either through our own experience of seeing, observing and recording, or through the shared experience of looking at another's drawn record of experience. So in creative education perhaps, the act of drawing is often the vehicle of choice for exploration and analytical encounter. One only needs to think about 1-minute drawing exercises or the type we've just witnessed in the last presentation perhaps. So often the diet of learning. Or watch perhaps the instantaneous responses of young children drawing at will. It's absolutely amazing. We're perhaps more familiar though with these provisional acts of drawing in what you might call shorthand drawings or sketches, certainly from very famous people. This is a sketchbook from Turner. It's called the Portsmouth Harbour sketchbook, I think. You can just see the slight scribbles if you're at the front and the back, you won't be able to see this. And I think art history has basically amplified the sort of subordinate nature, if you like, of preparatory drawing. It sort of relegated it to a sort of a bywork. But it's also worth considering the power of that visual tool as a learning moment, both in and of that act of thinking. And a good example is Turner. Obviously, this sketchbook has a huge array of drawings, all made at rapid speed. One of the drawings is an image of a boat coming into Portsmouth Harbour, and it kind of articulates this sense of moment through the rhythmic notations as the pencil dances on the paper. It's not surprising that we've also heard this morning a lot about Turner already, Ruskin already. Ruskin also was really keen on these drawings as a kind of contemporary way of thinking around the world. And he also sort of transcribed this piece of work here. So not only is it a book by Turner, Ruskin was pretty keen to put his initials all over it as well. And I think you can make out his signature somewhere. So in creative education, maybe this is the kind of vehicle of choice. I'm not sure. I suppose what I was minded of really was the fact that we're present here. We're very much present in this work. We're very much present in this act, in the same way that young girl trying to work out how she could get past the barrier of the step is in the moment of that experience. And that's what drawing kind of delivers to us, I think. Meskerman and Sorden kind of talked a little bit about how drawing is always already both an act and the outcome of the act in material form, drawing makes drawings make drawing. It's kind of a lovely idea. So increasingly, I guess, there have been all sorts of different approaches to drawing. We heard from Andrew also about the sort of expanded field of drawing, where the edges of drawing might be. And that's also to do with the sort of collapsing in of other discipline boundaries into where drawing might have existed as a kind of standalone. It's what Simon Downes calls the aggregate of experience, perhaps. So it's a kind of interesting collision of where a drawing is. This is a drawing made by a student using a very large tractor and lots of burning hay, determined by the outcome being a video piece of work. So again, the boundary is slightly collapsing. So drawing's relationship really to other dependencies has increasingly become the subject of academic investigation. There'll be plenty of colleagues in the room for whom that's a modus operandi. We're very interested in this. And maybe it's been given further cause by the conceptual art practices developed in the 1960s and 70s. We can't really escape that. I recently asked a group of MA students during a seminar, and this isn't just to appease the Bristol crowd here either, by the way, but I asked them which was the artist they felt best epitomised this sort of approach to drawing practice in terms of a contemporary world. And they cited Richard Long. I felt that was really odd, because you don't think necessarily of him being the kind of drawer. But they cited this work in particular, which I think we're all familiar with, a line made by Walking. And another artist also, Anna Barrable, whose work, again, will be familiar to some of you. I just wanted to explain the experience I had seeing this work with students in the Baltic in Gateshead. So this is the work on the right. It's called Draw. It's actually a video work, but it's just this piece of paper which every now and again just sucks itself to the grate of the Victorian fireplace, and it goes, and it assumes the ribs of the fire grate, and then it relaxes, and it just keeps doing that endlessly. And I remember watching, sort of in amazement, these students literally beginning to syncopate with this work, which became a sort of form of drawing in some way. And of course the work is called Draw. It's a pun on the draw of the fire. And it was a very powerful kind of extension of what I thought drawing could be. I'm somebody who has spent a long time actually doing drawing and with students with charcoal. So for me this felt quite radical and interesting. So I'm kind of getting towards the end of my sort of précédent talk, if you like. Again, if you can't see the title of the slide at the back, it's called Falling Water. It's by an MA student. It is a pun. It was installed, I think, in the downstairs, about to be knocked down premises of Southwest Water. So a little pun going on about Frank Lloyd Wright's building. That's the asymmetric drawing on the left-hand side. I suppose what's really fundamental for me is the amount of times that we might invest students, particularly in terms of creative practice, into the process of drawing. And I think the ways to articulate that are through exhibitions, through moving students into that space of critical thinking. I curated a show in 2000 in the Swindon Museum and Art Gallery, small provincial gallery, you might know it. It's got a very big collection of the St Ives School. Sorry, the shameless plug for UWE going on there. But we got students to look at the works that were in the collection. We got permissions, and they chose a work, and they responded to the work through drawing, and they were showing alongside Henry Moore and Ben Nicholson and all the rest of it. And it was a wonderful, wonderful moment. And what we got out of that was some incredible kind of feedback. We had the estate of Graham Sutherland writing to a student saying, my God, Graham valued drawing. We can't believe you still do that. And it was fantastic for students. They hung their work next to these artists, and it was just a magic moment. I think Lucy introduced the context of UWE, but again, there was a show here. I think I was in this show, but it was a show all around drawing, which was, I think, in 2008. So there's a good context of bringing drawing, the premise of drawing, into the art school and exposing it in new ways. It was called that show was called Drawing Place, Drawing Space. And I think it was exhibited at Bower Ashton in the gallery there. That one went on to Leeds. And again, a lot of students became incredibly invested in the idea that drawing was accessible to them. I've been involved in a project called Ology with a colleague called Deborah Harty, some of you may know. a project around drawing as phenomenology. But again, the project sucked in a lot of students into that narrative and discussion around what drawing can be. There's a fabulous kind of thing called Anonymous Drawings Archive. If you haven't ever come across it, look it up. It's a project by an artist in Berlin called Anke Becker, and it's essentially it is what it says it is. It's an open worldwide submission of anonymous drawings, and this collection of drawings has grown and grown and grown to become this overwhelming archive of work. There was a project I ran when I was at Norwich University Arts, which was a drawing project, but we had artists like the late Roger Ackling who came, who basically walked around a lot, and the students seemed quite mystified that he saw that as a form of drawing, and they were quite perplexed. And it was actually run by Hamish Fulton, who actually got a student just to, they thought they got their backpacks on, thinking they were coming for a day's walk in the hills, and he said, no, you're just going to walk around and round in a circle for 5 hours, which they did dutifully, of course. So I guess that world of drawing has expanded. We're currently doing a project in Plymouth, part of the Illuminate Festival, working with an artist called Xavier Beauvais, using digital projection mapping to map onto Royal William Yard, if you know Plymouth. But the point about that is it just seems quite natural for the students just to be engaged in these projects which they feel are drawing. But this is actually a digital space. It involves no actual drawing whatsoever. But again, the project is attracting, last year we had 28,000 people came to see this. The public being interested in the spectacle of drawing perhaps. People doing strange things on floors. Students really taking up the baton of drawing in terms of running. This was an MA drawing symposium called the Embodied Drawing Experience of Drawing. So again, it mirrors a little bit what Andrew was talking about in terms of that extension of practice. A student of ours from Plymouth actually winning the student award in the what is now the Trinity Boy Wharf. I can't underestimate how influential the Jerwood Prize, as it was, has been on my career, but also on the careers of my students. It's been really fundamental. It's great to see students doing great work and winning things using real drawing still, which I really value. I'll just end with one last quote, really, which is, again, going back to Richard Serra. And it's a really lovely one, really. It's just drawing as a way of seeing into your own nature. And he says nothing more, and maybe there is nothing more. Thank you.